Can you guys see that PowerPoint? Yes, okay, great. Right, well, it looks like it's 12 noon. I want to respect our panelists' time and try and get through as much as we can today. Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Ian Baxter. I'm a planner at the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, and I'd like to welcome you to our fourth and final installment of our fall-winter 2021/2022 speaker series. Today, we're going to be discussing faith-based organizations in affordable housing. And I will briefly like to thank our sponsors for their generous financial support for our speaker series, Dominion Energy, the Charlottesville Area Association of Realtors, Bama Works, and the University of Virginia Community Credit Foundation, or Credit Union, excuse me. A few quick housekeeping things before we get started. Greg, our moderator, has a list of questions that he's going to be working through with our panelists during the roundtable, but we encourage you to submit questions through the chat. Later in the hour, we'll be selecting some of the questions to pose to our panelists, and any questions that we don't get to, we will follow up with the panelists to ensure that they have a chance to see them and respond that way. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator today, Greg Powell.
Thank you, Ian. And while I'm thanking people, I'd also like to particularly thank Stacy Pethia, who really leads the group within the Regional Housing Partnership that organizes these seminars. It's been a very good series, and we have 90 folks signed up today for a worthwhile discussion of faith-based affordable housing development. I'm Greg Powell. My firm, Powell Studio Architects, has a real passion for designing affordable housing, mainly in Central Virginia and DC. And I'm privileged to say that we are serving 3 of the 4 panelists today, so we know each other well. Today we have with us 2 pastors, both in the city of Charlottesville, whose congregations decided to develop affordable housing right on their own church properties. Pastor Colleen Swingle Titus from Park Street Christian Church, you know where that's located, on Park Street, and Pastor Robert Lewis of the Hinton Avenue United Methodist Church, which is in Belmont. We have a lay leader who chairs a regional faith-based organization determined to facilitate a special kind of affordable housing. Kim Crater, who is the chair of Rachel's Haven Vision Group with the United Methodist Churches, Charlottesville area. And finally, we have the president of a residential developer with a social mission to develop and operate affordable housing complexes all around the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia. And that's Larry Dickinson from Virginia United Methodist Housing Development Corporation. So starting with Colleen, why don't you just briefly introduce yourself and introduce the project, then we'll get into the whys and hows.
Okay, hi. Well, you know my name. I've been serving Park Street Christian Church since March 1st, 2015. And we have our hope is to build 50 units of affordable housing and homes for senior adults on our property. We have about 7.5 acres, right about the place where, Meadow Creek in that area. And a lot of it has some slopes, but we hope to use it to help the people in our community.
Kim?
Well, I'm Kim Crater, and I am not a pastor. I'm just a lay person in a Methodist church. And for those of you who aren't familiar with how Methodist churches work, we try to work together when possible, and we are organized into districts. So the Charlottesville district currently consists of 10 counties. And this project that we are undertaking is the project of all the churches within all the Methodist churches within those 10 counties. And so what we are trying to do is to build an apartment building on the property of Hinton Avenue United Methodist Church. And Robert will tell you more about that. But it does have a special focus. Our target population has always been people with intellectual disabilities or developmental disabilities. So our apartment building that we're hoping to build will have apartments that are set aside for folks with developmental disabilities. And it will also have apartments that are to be rented affordably to the general public. So it'll be kind of a mixed population.
Robert, Pastor Robert.
I'm Robert Lewis, and I am pastor of Hinton Avenue United Methodist Church. And I guess I've been here since July 2012, involved with the project that we're talking about from the outset, but at first just as one of those many churches that we're trying to support a larger goal. But we are now trying to do this here at Hinton Avenue. And one of the reasons that we're sort of part of a larger conversation about affordable housing is because we don't want to see those with intellectual disabilities sort of segregated and boxed off to themselves. So we're looking at probably about 4 units of housing for people with intellectual or developmental disabilities as part of the larger 15-unit community, which will all be affordable. And we can say more about all of that later.
So Larry and I last saw each other 12 hours ago as we finished up a zoning hearing out of Fluvanna County. Thank you so much for joining us, Larry.
Thankfully, I didn't get on any traffic tie-ups on Interstate 81 coming back this morning from Charlottesville. That was good. Yes, I'm Larry Dickinson. I'm the president of Virginia United Methodist Housing. I'm the successor to the founder, pastor, longtime president, Reverend Robert Regan, who started the corporation in 1975 and served as president until 2010. So I'm happy to, in my so-called retirement, have a new mission in life.
Kim, let's switch to how each of you decided to get involved actively, hands-on, in trying to create affordable housing. So how did Rachel's Haven Vision Group come about?
Well, as I mentioned a minute ago, our interest initially was specifically for people with intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities. We weren't really even thinking affordable housing initially. And this project has changed a number of times over the years. We've been at this for almost 9 years now. So it has changed a lot. We started trying to build a group home actually for folks with developmental disabilities. And then it changed to building an apartment building where folks with developmental disabilities can live in their own apartment. It's their own home, not a group home, something different. And just in the process of trying to figure all of that out, it became apparent that it would make the most sense if the entire apartment building were affordable housing. And this fits for us, our project and our heart in so many ways. Even the move from group home to apartment building, even before the affordable housing element came into it, was kind of a big step, a big jolt for us initially, because it felt more frightening in terms of can we keep everybody safe? Can we keep folks with developmental disabilities safe in apartments on their own? Because it's so different than a group home. And also it's just a bigger project as well, which was frightening to us. But as we began to think about it and imagine life for the folks with developmental disabilities in an apartment, it just seemed just such a more beautiful vision, a place where it can be their home, not like living in a dorm for your entire life, their home, where they get to decide how they decorate the living room, or what's for dinner tonight, or what am I doing today? And just in thinking about how we live out who we are, each of us are so individual, and how we live that out, it's through those small choices that we make every day. So being able to allow them room for those choices, but in a place that is somewhat sheltered. Supports will be coming in, and we are going to be figuring out, how much like supervision and support can we provide in the apartment building, or are we just going to be like super friendly neighbors who are super available? We're still figuring that out, but trying to make sure it's safe and supportive for them. But also knowing that they're going to be living in an apartment building with other folks who don't have disabilities or have different disabilities. And it's just the sharing of life and sharing each other's skills and just being appreciated for who you are. It just seemed like the apartment was such a better vision for those who are able to live in apartments independently or semi-independently. It just seemed like such a beautiful vision for them. So that kind of got us going. And then as time moved on and we learned about LIHTC, low-income housing tax credits, and how that could help us, really bring this apartment building to reality, that just was the icing on the cake for us, because we are so aware of the affordable housing crisis in Charlottesville and across the country. And we're just like, oh, so wonderful that we can help that situation too. And we came to this out of a place of faith. We came to the desire to help with the housing situation for folks with developmental disabilities out of a place of faith. And then God is taking us further and further, step by step. I mean, he has just blown this project, out of proportion, from where we started. It's just crazy what he's done. But long answer to a short question of how did we come to affordable housing, Greg? But that's the situation for the district. And then Robert, it can speak to his congregation more specifically.
So the answer to the question, how do you keep a volunteer organization together for 9 years, has just been demonstrated by Kim's passion and faith. Robert, Robert, a real site on which to develop projects is always one of the key cornerstones to having a project. And one of the challenges in our region is to find sites for development. So speak, Robert, to how you and your congregation got so engaged that you offered a part of your church property.
Sure. So as I said, I came to Hinton Avenue in 2012. We're a small congregation, still living in a house that was built for a larger family. And so dealing with the issues of our building has been a constant challenge. The current buildings that we're in, there have been several on this site, I believe, but the current buildings date from 1948, 1956. And so we were happily going along, supporting the work that Kim and others were doing, you know, taking special offerings and doing all of those things like other churches. But in 2016, we began to experience some sewer issues that we thought were going to require a really, really costly repair to the point of having to tear up the street on Hinton Avenue all the way down past the corner, and it was just a nightmare. And we knew there was no way that we could really afford to do that. And that, I think, was the catalyst. That was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back for people to say, you know, there must be something better to do with this gift we've been given, this building that has been passed on to us and the property it's on. This must be something better than just sort of continually patching up, you know, the faults. And so I found the email the other week, June 9th, 2016, after one of our church council meetings where we had discussed this, and somebody had said, well, you know, that apartment project was what we were calling it at the time, the Charlottesville apartment project. It was a very exciting name. But, you know, that district apartment project, does it have a site yet? Does it have a location? And I said, I'll ask and I'll find out. And so I did. I reached out, and that began, I think, the process of our conversation of trying to see if what the larger group was trying to do would work on our site and whether it would be mutually beneficial. I think at the very outset, there were certainly hopes that this would solve all the problems and take all the building issues away. We just somehow would change one for the other and we'd be good, but obviously can't do that. But that really was the catalyst. And I think over time, the congregation has only grown more and more convinced of its importance in ensuring that this vision comes to reality. And as Kim said, it just seems miraculous how it's come about. And there were so many times where none of us really knew what we were doing or how we would do it. And we just kept pushing on doors. And sometimes to our chagrin, the door kept opening. I mean, sometimes we thought, oh, good, you know, we can let this go, but we couldn't. And for right now, I would just say that the transformation from just housing for people with intellectual or developmental disabilities to a larger affordable housing vision, I think in our congregation, the importance of that, and certainly for me, came about through, you know, all that has happened here in Charlottesville and around the country since 2017, but particularly my involvement with other clergy and around the city after August 12th, and in all of the conversations that we have generated around what it means to be a fairer, more equitable city. Property and real estate and, you know, accumulated wealth and housing, they're all key to that. And so it really did just confirm that, yes, we're limited because of what we want to do into only being able to do this for a certain number of people with intellectual disabilities on this site, but there's a much larger project as well, and that's being part of the overall affordable housing solution. And so we have just kind of grown in our commitment that the whole thing fits together so nicely. And so as we've gone along that road, it feels like Hinton Avenue has taken more and more of a front seat. Obviously, as we come closer to reality, it started at the very beginning. It's kind of like, well, let's just explore it and they'll do it all. And, you know, and now we're at the point of, oh no, this is really our thing too. But that's exciting.
Pastor Colleen, how did your congregation get involved, and you personally?
So it's interesting. I not to get into church polity, but we are a small congregation, very small congregation, sitting on 7.5 acres, as I mentioned that. But we don't have a regional web of support. I mean, we have a lot of denominational support, but in the Disciples of Christ tradition, it's called local autonomy of the church, meaning we self-govern and self-direct. We want to be in line with our general, you know, the bigger picture, but we get take on or ignore everything that we want. So as a person of faith, it's been pretty clear that we've been called, and in our faith tradition, especially, I'm not going to give you a sermon or cite a lot of scripture, but the greatest commandments are to love God with all your heart, soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. I'm some of that pretty quickly. And it seems like when you hear something like that, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room in it, but it seems historically, sadly, not just in the Christian tradition, but in a lot of faith traditions, we've found our way around the charge to care for our neighbors and think not only of ourselves. So I've spent my life in church as a student and in service on staff, and I like to say I'm pleased as punch to have found a home at Park Street Christian Church. We're just self-described as a small church with big heart, and historically their founding was 60 years ago, a little over 60, and they purchased and were able to purchase this plot of land, which probably was almost like on the outskirts at this point when you think of how things have built up around it. And they had a vision of an intergenerational campus with buildings peppered across what I call the biggest yard in Charlottesville. And they even had a 3D model built, like with little teeny wire stick figures that had it all plotted out. In fact, our sanctuary was intended to be the fellowship hall. They didn't move beyond that, but by 1998, this whole idea of serving the generations really found its place in our largest ministry, which is affordable childcare. And we've celebrated just about 25 years there, meeting a much needed population in Charlottesville. For those of you who aren't familiar with Impact Seville, not only have they taken on the affordable housing, the lack of that monster, and challenged the local authorities to, take heed, but they also, the current focus is for affordable quality childcare and preschools. And we are happy to say that, we've been doing that for 25 years. And in the same way that Robert has explained maybe how we found ourselves in what I consider a fortuitous situation at this point, is that our preschool, when I came in in 2015, had already been on, the punch list of something needs to be done here. We have a great program, but it's really kind of a squished space and in need of some renovation. And we didn't know how we were going to do it. And then they have this crazy pastor there who also had this idea in her mind about some studies that talked about the benefits of intergenerational activities. And for those of you who haven't been involved in, a local church, in the 90s, program-based ministries just went crazy, and they divided all the age groups. So we have wonderful youth groups and wonderful children program, but nobody ever spent any time together anymore. And we're seeing this value, the social study of the benefit of having preschoolers and senior adults come together and have this, a village takes care of this village, which fast forward brings us to plotting all the needs that we knew we needed at our church, one including, we've kind of joked around about this, but a handicap accessible bathroom. So it's like, it's kind of strange, the thing that called us into this, both churches, plumbing. So we ended up talking with several people, and then eventually we were introduced to Bruce Wardell of BRW Architects, who came and said, you have a lot of great ideas. Let's talk about how we can have them happen. And we sat around a table. Brian Day, who is, my champion, I told him if I could knight him, I would. We sat with a table just to interview with Bruce. And we were all on the same page. This is lovely. How are we going to do it? And we were kind of sad when we realized we don't know. And he was getting ready to leave. And I said, before you go, I have this wild idea. It'd be wonderful if somehow we could put some housing for senior adults on here, affordable housing in particular with the impact. And he took his coat back off. He sat back down. He goes, I think I found your way to do this, to serve two populations in need. So that's how we got to the table. I think we really started talking about this renovation seriously probably in 2016, but have been really, BRW has really held our hand throughout this and patiently guided us through a visioning process, which a lot of times you bring in your church experts from your region, but our guardian angel has been Bruce and his team, who really have cared for us and kept us believing in this big dream. I think that's about it.
We'll get to how each of the churches has found a way in common to implement the visions. But first, Larry, why don't you talk about how the organization got so involved and how it functions today on your social.
So the early 1970s, a lot of change was going on in Virginia as well as the rest of the country, and a particularly pesky pastor named Robert Regan was serving in Northern Virginia and perceived that there was people in the congregation and people around the region that were having a very difficult time finding affordable housing, and were having to spread farther and farther out to find it. So he petitioned the Virginia Conference of the Methodist Church that they needed to do something about it. And after several years of being a pesky gadfly, the church commissioned a study which validated that, yes, that the concern he had was real, and it was beyond Northern Virginia. It was all over the state. And so gave him permission then in 1975 to form a corporation, and without a lot of direction said, go and do something about it. And so the Virginia United Methodist Housing Development Corporation was born in 1975, and it served until a year ago as a volunteer organization. We had a volunteer board. We had no employees. And over the process of time, we were able to develop properties around the state of Virginia, some that were financed through HUD, some financed through tax credits through VHDA, or Virginia Housing, as they're now referred to. So currently we have 16 properties that total about 900 units of housing around the state, and another 1,100 units where we teamed up as a nonprofit participant with a for-profit developer, and been helpful then in developing and operating those 1,100 units around the state of Virginia, also with several different developers. So our approach grew over time, but it was always based really on knowing that we needed to collaborate, that we did not have either the money nor the professional capacity and tools to do all this by ourselves. And we had to find people who would collaborate with us to help us do something about the deficit of affordable housing in Virginia. So that's how we got into it. I personally was minding my business one day in 1996, and I received a letter from Reverend Regan that said, welcome, you've been nominated and elected by the Virginia Conference to serve on our board. And our next board meeting is in 3 weeks or whatever it was, and we look forward to seeing you. And I came to the first board meeting and got bit by the bug and of the mission, and have been involved with the organization since then. And in 2016, was approached by several of the officers and board members asking if they elected me, would I serve as president? So that's how I got to where I am, and the organization itself has stayed on the mission, very focused with. We focus on creating independent living apartment properties. The smallest one we have is 24 units. The largest one is 150 units. And so we've stayed focused on that. And that's how we got there. And we've gotten a pretty good reputation around the state because we have stayed focused on it and treat each property as a highly valued asset, making sure that working with our property manager, they stay the property stay in good physical shape, and the residents are real people. And we've stayed serving that need. That's how we got involved.
Thank you. So what's exciting about this panel, it's time to reveal, is that both church projects have come together in, I think, a miraculous way. And I think that our angel is Piedmont Housing Alliance. And so perhaps starting with Kim, then Robert, and then Colleen, how did each of your organizations end up deciding to affiliate with one another to create the critical mass to help develop this?
Well, once we were presented with the opportunity to partner with Park Street Christian Church, it was so easy to say yes. And I know, Greg, at one point you were asking about process. Is this the process question? Because we've been 9 years in the process getting to this point.
Well, and where we've ended up is partnering, and why are we partnering, and with whom are we partnering?
Well, we are, as I mentioned, the project has changed and morphed a number of times over the years, and we have partnered, pursued 2 other partnerships seriously with nonprofits. And now we are seriously pursuing a 3rd, and it's pretty much, I would say, it feels like a solid partnership, except not a lot has been signed yet. The final paperwork for a true partnership hasn't been signed, but the nonprofit that has been walking us through this, our latest partner is Piedmont Housing Alliance. And they, of course, many of you, I'm sure, know their name. They have a very good reputation in developing and managing affordable housing around our area. And we are just so excited to be partnering with them. And the way that we came to know about Park Street, Rachel's Haven is a small project, 15 apartments, and we have been told by numerous people over the years that our project is really too small to be funded by LIHTC. And so if it's going to be funded by LIHTC, it needs to be joined together with another project to bring it up to LIHTC's threshold. So as we are having conversations with Piedmont Housing Alliance, it turns out, unbeknownst to us, that so was Park Street. And so I think it was Piedmont Housing Alliance idea that we began talking together about, would it work for Rachel's Haven and Park Street's housing to be joined together on one LIHTC application. And so Robert and Colleen got together. That was the first step, and I'll let them speak to that. But my own personal feeling about it, I was so excited that there's another church that's trying to do something very similar to what we're doing, that's living out their faith in that way, and to get to partner. I mean, we knew we would have to be joined together with another project, but that it's another faith-based project just felt so good. And then what came out of the pastors' conversations together and everything since then has just reinforced my deep belief that God has been in this the whole time, because this is like a match made in heaven, in my opinion. But I'll let Robert and Colleen take it from here.
Robert, do you want to add anything to that before we switch
Sure.
to Colleen?
Yeah, I'll just briefly kind of describe that long period in the wilderness. It was early 2017 when our first partnership really fell apart because of what was happening in the country and worries about funding and Medicaid, and it just, that partner just said, we can't move forward with anything new. And I think that was a tremendous blow to us and a real moment of soul searching, because our first response, I think, was, well, then we just can't do anything. And we came around to saying, no, we have to find a way to make this happen. But we did not have the money or the expertise. We had no idea how to do what we wanted to do. We just had the vision. And so that really set us down a road of trying to find others who could help us. And it took a long, long time to find, something that really did fit. And in part because of the kind of the uniqueness of our project, the small size. We had great conversations with Larry that it just didn't work, and so much the case with others. So PHA, really is the angel in this for kind of seeing the possibility that we could bring these two projects together. And know how to do that. And I think we'll come to challenges and things, but obviously churches have the resource, but they really may not have any clue how to go about doing what they want to do. And it can take a long, long time to get connected to the people who can help you do that. Is I think what I would add to.
Well, why don't you pick up on that, Colleen?
Yeah, I want to say, and I know we're going to talk about advice and whatever, but I think that it was really important, and that to encourage people to keep your eyes and ears open and your mind wide open. When you're a small church, especially, you feel so overwhelmed by the doorknobs are falling off, and then you're talking about something grand, but we do really need a hot tub. I mean, it seems so contradictory to be small and then hitting COVID. Just we could spend hours talking about that. So I think it's really important, and in our process is to start talking, and I always use a metaphor of throwing spaghetti against the wall and see which noodle's going to stick to see if it's done, because I think you don't shut yourself off. And I think that's been being able to surround yourself and creating a development team within your own space or your own district, who I say, you have your feet on the ground and your eyes on the stars, and don't forget that, and balance it out. And with that, we had this energy, and we knew, we started getting this sense of we can, how crazy is it for us to take on something up this alongside the immediate things that we need to address. And we were introduced to BRW, and the interesting thing with them, because we were like, we don't know what to do, but we also had some people in our congregation that were really like plumber, putty, duct tape, we can make anything work folks. And it was a matter of being able to tell all of us who've done our own, auto work, that we don't have to have the answers. Let's lean in and find a partner who can lead us, who we can trust. And that first step was with BRW, who we immediately felt good about. And then for that team to say, we need to get your church, we need to find a common language, we need to get, surround your hearts around this project, because it's going to take a long time and it's going to take a lot of effort. So we went through this visioning process, or a roundtable town hall that Bruce and Whitney, his sidekick at BRW, led us through, which then brought us to the place of having a common language. So we redid mission statement, we did core values. I mean, all these things we hadn't anticipated to do that. And during that time, we were all on the same page. And then COVID hit, and we ended up probably in May, in some ways twiddling our thumbs, and we reached back out to BRW because everything, stopped there for a while. So why don't we keep going with this? So we planned a charrette and brought a bunch of different people who we know would be interested and supportive together. And one of the people that was invited to come to that was Sunshine from PHA. And it was like kismet. It was, oh my goodness. I mean, it was just like, this is it. And we did have some other people who wanted to partner, but having a local agency that's so committed, that knows the community, it was a no-brainer at this point. And I have to say right now to my role models of this project of Rachel's Haven, we were watching, knowing we had these ideas bubbling up and going, one, being terrified about what you all had to go through and some of the zoning and all that kind of stuff, and going, they just want to do good for the community, be nice to them. But then just celebrating when you got your rezoning, and it gave us the confidence. So I hope that this intermingling that we had, it was just, as Kim said, when we were approached first through BRDW on behalf of PHA, would you be interested in talking to this group? I mean, they were already like our heroes. I mean, Hinton is like they need capes. They were of course we'll talk with them. And then to sit and have the conversation on Zoom and get to meet Robert and all of the folks involved in this project, it's ecumenical at its best, and I'm grateful for it.
Amen.
Can I just briefly add something to that, Greg? Because I really should have mentioned, of course, that part of that process for us was you appearing and saying, hey, I've heard about this thing and it really speaks to me and I really want to support it. When we hit the COVID wall and I thought, oh, this is going to shut everything down, that was around the time that we, within our vision team, said, you know what, we really need to get some other voices from the community that are outside the Methodist Church. And we brought in 3 new board members who brought their wealth of experience and connections. So that kind of kismet of not knowing exactly who to ask, but reaching out and finding new people who, have been paying attention and really do support. Sometimes it feels like nobody else cares that we get this happen. What we found is, oh my gosh, everybody wants to see this happen. And that's just so amazing. And we're so grateful for that support and all those folks.
So what I find fascinating is both congregations had a team put together, architects working to come up with a physical vision, but developing it, actually implementing it, is such a highly technical, complex, particularly affordability, where you have to find ways to effectively subsidize the capital costs of the project through grants and other means, and then find ways in some cases through vouchers and so on to make it more affordable on the operating side too. And that's where Piedmont Housing Alliance certainly, but also on a statewide base, that's where Larry's organization can bring that kind of expertise and by the way, welcomes partnerships to bring that expertise too. And importantly, anybody's got a site out there that it's always the site that needs to be part of the seeding of a new project. So Larry, let's talk about the process and your development organization skills.
Yeah, so the way that we approach the process is very much like any other real estate developer that's attempting to develop housing and housing that is congregate, so multifamily type setting, is you have to find a site. You have to make sure the site can accommodate that use, and if it cannot, then you have to go through a series of hoops with the locality to accomplish the proper zoning. And then at the same time, you have to be working on, okay, if we have a project here that we think can work, how do we finance it? And what is the means? And so for us, we sort of have a split program where about half our properties have been financed using the low-income housing tax credits, and about half have been done through direct grants from HUD, where HUD would provide the money to build the project, but then HUD would set the rent rates, kind of a variation of the old 202 projects that HUD would do. They operate a little bit differently, but HUD would give us the grant to build it, then HUD would set the rent rates, and the residents would pay 30% of their income. And if there was a delta between the rent rate and the 30% they could pay, then HUD would make up the difference. And the challenge there is in that program is if you're able to somehow manage any kind of a profit, I'll say, if there's anything left at the end of the year that would be considered profit, HUD comes in, sweeps it up, and takes it. So it leaves you with the problem over time, or the challenge of how do you keep these properties maintained. So now we're getting ready to make application to HUD under a new program called RAD. I won't go into what the acronyms mean, but attempting to do a mass refinancing of 8 projects at one time through this RAD process. So we could do a comprehensive renovation and in several cases expand the size of the projects. But the process is begins with the mission, and we stay very focused on our mission. It's affordable housing. That means it's people earning less than 60% of median income, which is a different calculation county by county, city by city across the state. But those are our people. That's who we focus on. And we try not to make the business any more complicated than it is, because it is, as has been said, the process is very complicated. You're on mute, Greg.
We keep using the term low-income tax credits, low-income housing tax credit, LIHTC, which is an annual program that Virginia Housing competes. And next year, the 2 churches will be a scattered site combined LIHTC application. The project that we're working on out in Fluvanna County is looking at LIHTC as well as part of the answer to how you help reduce the initial costs of the project to make it more affordable. Ian, I see we're on. We have a couple of questions. Do you want to share the questions with the panel?
Yeah, sure thing. And I believe that this is probably one of your questions anyway, but this question's from Claudia Aiken, and she asks, how do you navigate community or neighbor resistance to affordable housing development, as the first part of the question? But then the second half I think is interesting. Was there any resistance from within your own congregations? And if so, how do you navigate or address that? So I guess we can start with Kim and Robert, if that makes sense.
Shall I start that, Kim? Let me start with within the congregation. I mean, absolutely, there are always folks who are frightened by change, and I think a particular challenge for pastors who may come and go is that you haven't lived there your entire life and had all of your relatives married and buried in that sanctuary and so forth. And so really our biggest point of resistance came from people who said, I remember all the wonderful things that have happened in that building. And we're not even, we're not doing away with the church. We're doing away with just one part. But even those Sunday school classrooms where I went to Sunday school, where my kids came to youth group, I hate to see those go. And I can't say what it was that we said or did, but with some time and a lot of patient listening and a lot of just continually reminding people of the calling and the vision, and particularly as Christians, the responsibility that we have felt to be good stewards of the gifts that God has given us. One by one, those folks began to say, you know what, I realize I'll always have those memories but those great things are not happening there right now. And I want to see something better happening because those rooms are sitting empty. So that was kind of the process for us, but there certainly was resistance. And in the larger context of the community, I mean, there's definitely been resistance, and I think, again, just change is hard. And people particularly don't want to see the neighborhood that they have chosen to live in change, and maybe especially in ways that they think might impact their quality of life or their property values. And there's a lot of uncertainty and fear, and you can't promise and say, oh no, that won't happen. We don't know. But I think you can make the best faith argument that you can, that you hear those concerns and are trying to respect them. We certainly go through a process of getting neighborhood feedback, and that definitely went into adjusting our plans through the rezoning process, and building in proffers that we made that no, we're not going to consider that future use. But I think there again, kind of at the end of the day, you have to kind of listen to the call and respond to the vision and say, this is what we think God wants to see here, and we're going to keep trying to do that until we're told we can't. And so that was that matter of kind of just pushing on the doors. And in that process, what was so heartwarming and encouraging was that for all the folks who did have concerns, there were many, many more who stood up to say, we really want to see this happen. We think it should. We want to see more like this. We support it. And, and those were people showing up at city council meetings that speaking on our behalf that we did not know. And so kind of weighing, there's always criticism against, and there's also definitely a sense of need and a desire to see this happen has kind of kept us going forward.
Colleen, internal, external resistance?
So our internal, because we went through this visioning process, and we listened to everyone and talked about the things that we wanted to be doing. It came together, taking the time to listen to the congregation before really we launched into something large, and that took a while. And I'm one of the least patient people that I know, so for me to direct that took a bunch of willpower because I want everything done yesterday. But I think that, we really haven't had a lot of grumbling or rumbling. Our church isn't as old as Hinton, and it's seen a lot of loss and sadness in its history. So I think we've come together in good faith. I think that the level of time and commitment that we might need from people, you have to find the right people that are so passionate about it that they give the time. So I'm so blessed to have a team of people that are like that. So it's not that other people aren't praying or contributing or participating. It's just that it's not having to be shouldered as much. So I don't think I've had the resistance within the congregation. For our neighborhood, we have this beautiful wooded area. When I say beautiful, it needs tending. We can't afford to tend it, groom it, care for it in the way that we want. We have a kind of a trail system that was first forged by the deer in our area. And then during COVID, our neighbors who were working from home started using our property even more, playing in our big giant front yard and walking through the woods. And when they first heard about us talking about this, I think that rightly so, people should be scared to death of developers plowing all these trees down and, whatever, put up a parking lot, the whole Joni Mitchell song. So, and they have rights to be scared of that, because that does happen. We see it happen all the time. But to be able to convey that we love our trees, and that PHA is putting up, green and sustainable ways, their plans, working with the architects to provide something that respects the green space, listening to them. And when they're talking about horrible traffic congestion that Charlottesville is becoming more and more notorious for, to understand that we're going to listen, and we're going to hope to listen to how to direct and redirect traffic, and And they have been forthcoming and saying, these are concerns we had before. Now we're worried about, so hopefully we're going to be able to partner and maybe bring some attention to the much needed traffic patterns. But I think that's been the biggest thing. I think listening to your neighbors and trying not to take it personally is hard when you want to be known in your community as a faith-based organization that wants to care for the community, and pair that with their suspicion that we just want to do whatever it is that they think we want to do. You have to listen and not listen to that, because we all come to the table broken. And we just have to be as forthcoming as possible. I will say one of the challenges, not knowing what in the world we're doing, right? I've done this before, is leaning in on your, like Piedmont, and saying, when can we, when should we, how do we do this outreach? What are your suggestions? And trusting that they've done this before. and not feeling like you have to problem solve all yourself. And that's carried us through what I would consider some of the challenges we've had from some of the folks that live close by.
Thanks. We've got 5 minutes left. Larry, maybe after the 3.5-hour public hearing we had last night, I shouldn't ask you your thoughts on Not in My Backyard, NIMBYism. I wanted to give each of you a chance to just, maybe we've only got a minute each, to talk about advice you might want to share with other faith-based organizations that are contemplating either developing or helping facilitate affordable housing. Larry?
Who are you
Larry?
looking to speak? Okay. I'll start. So just a few things I've been jotting down, and what we've heard from the local churches there in Charlottesville. Mission still attracts people. And mission for people is attractive. I know with my board of directors, I can't run them off the board. They've all, like I did, got bitten by the bug. They want to be a part of this good work. So it all begins with that mission focus. But a few other learning points for individual congregations. I've talked to several, and my advice to Hinton a few years ago, they didn't take. I'm glad they didn't at this point in time, but it was, look, the city values your site at $2.5 million. I'd go find somebody to pay you $2.5 million and go partner with another church, and you got a huge trust fund to put to work. They thought I had 3 heads and went their own way, so good for them. But
Kim?
a point that we've tried to help a number of congregations understand is that creating a component of affordable housing is most likely not going to solve any underlying church financial conditions. I met with a Korean church late last year, and they had an extra 6 acres. They wanted to develop affordable housing. And at the end of listening for a while, I summarized it as, I think what you're telling me is you'd like us to buy it and develop affordable housing. You'd like us to pay a premium to buy it because it's in a good location. And at the end of it, when it goes into operation, you'd like to get a very strong monthly income stream out of it. I said, you can have one of the 3. You don't get all 3. You pick your one, but that's all that you could get. We can't solve all those underlying problems by putting in affordable housing. Although I will say that then one of the trends that is bubbling up, and I know there's a group very active in North Carolina doing this, creating kind of back to the future faith villages. We're taking extra land around churches and developing it for housing or commercial space or whatever that's going to bring people into that little district that's centered on the church. as a way of continuing to keep the church relevant in all the activities of life. So that might include daycare, might include a coffee shop, might include some
Larry?
kind of counseling center. Yes.
We've got 2 minutes left, so let me just interrupt, unfortunately. Kim, advice?
First advice is find a partner. Church folks don't know how to do this. We don't know how to do housing. We would have saved a lot of time had we found a partner more quickly. Second piece of advice is find a good lawyer also who specializes in real estate. And in our case, ground leases are really important. We lost a good partner because we didn't have a lawyer, and nor did the partner that could think creatively to figure out a solution on how to keep both of us safe. We went to PHA with a different lawyer, and I guess they had a different lawyer, and our concerns had a very easy answer with a different lawyer. So my advice is get a lawyer with real estate experience.
And Colleen, any advice?
So I would say the way that you pick up loose change and you start putting it in those old water bottles, in the same, using that as a metaphor, you have to start somewhere, and don't shut doors. I love Robert's use of look for openings, stop looking for ways to shut them. And if you are a person of faith, I like to use the word believe what it is you say you believe. And I think if you lean into that, and you will be surprised what the openings are, but you got to keep your eyes open and your heart girded. So that's it.
So we're unfortunately out of time. There are other questions that we'll try to answer via email, but Robert, would you like to have the last word of advice? You're muted.
Sorry about that. I'll underscore what Larry said. That don't expect this to fix any problems with your church or faith community, except that it will require you to stop living solely for yourselves and to live for others. And to that, I add that we have so many resources locked up in church property that could be better used when there is so much need, that I think we all kind of have to examine how we might respond to that call.
And on that note, I thank you all for participating and for joining us today to hear from our panelists. This wraps up the series with the Regional Housing Partnership for this season. Stay tuned for next season. And thank you all very much. Bye-bye.